1,500 beers will be poured by 624 breweries from 48 states. Get this, 48,000 gallons of beer is going to be served over the next 3 days. Public tickets sold out to the event in under 20 minutes, and brewery registration was gone in under 2 hours.
The Colorado Brewers Guild has been around since 1997. Our mission is to promote and protect Colorado craft brewers. We protect them by spending time at the state capitol. In Colorado, we have a wonderful set of laws and rules that our brewers get to work under. We also promote craft beer on lots of different levels with education, public relations, all kinds of ways to just help elevate craft beer in Colorado and really make what we call Colorado the state of craft beer. We're up to 230 plus breweries in our state, so the tourism that comes here, people come visit breweries, they come to the hotels, they come to the restaurants, and when they get to Colorado, they start looking for these craft beers. Some people come to Colorado just to visit breweries. We've got 230. There's easy ways to make vacations out of driving through the state, visiting different towns and their different brewing cultures for sure. Colorado's first microbrewery was Boulder Beer. They got their license back in 1979. Craft beer has been around here for over 30 years. The Brewers Association is located in Boulder. They're our national trade group. They were actually founded in Colorado. So the Brewers Association does a lot of things for our industry. The Great American Beer Festival might be the most well-known thing that they do for craft beer, and that takes place in Denver and has for over 30 years. That puts a national and even a global spotlight on Colorado for at least 1 week a year.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm from Singapore. I'm here in Denver for the Great American Beer Festival. I'm actually a beer retailer back in Singapore. American craft beers are actually really growing in Singapore and in fact most parts of Southeast Asia. So to be able to be in America and in a state where it's very, very well known for craft beers, oh my God, that's like, beer nirvana.
My name is Fabio, I'm from Brazil, and I'm here for the event Great American Beer Festival. We programmed this trip around 6 months ago, and then we come to realize a dream.
Colorado's got wonderful water to brew with. And that attracts brewers. That makes brewers want to be here to make their beer because it gives them a good step ahead. Colorado is a wonderful place to live. And these people that are starting these craft breweries, they want their dream business most likely in their dream town or their dream state. And that's another thing that's helping this growth is these brewers that are coming here, they want to be here. What makes a craft beer different than a large domestic produced beer is going to be, first of all, the ingredients. Real hops and malt, no adjuncts like corn or rice are used in these beers. These are also all independent businesses. They're family owned. They're not owned by corporate global conglomerates. And so you're supporting your community when you support craft beer. So the ingredients and the independent nature of craft beer really makes it a different beast. One thing that's really kicking on the craft beer renaissance that we see in our country right now and even in Colorado is just that need to know who's behind what you're supporting. We like to know who makes our coffee in the morning, who makes our bagels. We like to know who brews our beer. And it's that connection and that accessibility that these breweries offer to the beer lovers that really gives beer lovers a connection to that brewery. Growth of craft beer, right now, craft beer makes up about 7% of beer sales nationwide. And we see and feel all this growth in breweries opening, breweries expanding, all this happening. But we're still only 7% of all beer sold in this country. So how much growth is left? A lot. Craft brewers make a significant economic impact in Colorado's economy. Craft brewers directly contribute about $826 million in revenue in 2013 to the state's economy. So that's pretty significant, and that's also employing over 5,000 full-time jobs. If you love craft beer, you want to be part of this revolution, and hops is a really cool way. And we'd love more hops in Colorado. We have amazing farmers, we have great growing conditions. The interest and the energy around growing hops in Colorado is at an all-time high. We got hops being grown on the western slope. We have some hops being grown here on the Front Range. And brewers love using local products in their beers. But when they can get the staples, grain and hops, locally on a regular basis and at high quality, that's a very attractive factor that brewers like to bring in.
Hops are a sort of leafy bud that adds some great flavor to beer.
Hops add flavor to beer.
Hops add the flavor to the beer.
Hops add a lot of flavor to beer.
Hops add flavor to beers.
Hops are what makes the beer a beer.
Hops add a great flavor to the beer.
Hops are an amazing flavor agent used in beer.
Hops kind of gives you a taste, the taste that you're looking for.
Hops are an ingredient to smooth out and flavor beers.
Hops are a plant that contributes a bitterness and a flower, sort of floral aroma to beer.
Alpha acids.
I have no idea on that one.
Hops are the most incredible plant on earth. That's all I have to say about that.
I first got interested in hops back in 2001. I've been a home brewer at that time for about 10 years and started a research scientist position for CSU on the West Slope, and I was allowed to have a pet project, so I thought, let's see if hops will grow here, and it just kind of took off from there. I did some research trials and find out of 30 or so varieties what would work, what didn't. And after about 5 or 6 years, I had a good idea of how to grow them, what would grow, and how well they grow here. And then in 2008 was the hop crisis, and then I started getting bunches of questions about how hops grow and how to grow them and that kind of stuff. So that's how I got interested, and for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been in extension working with growers who are growing hops. The hops that we grow here originated in Europe. Some of the hops we grow now were bred in Washington State at the USDA Hop Research Center there, such as Cascade was bred in the 1950s, and now it's popular here. And a lot of the varieties we grow were bred at the USDA Center in Oregon. There's hops all over the place in Colorado that the pioneers brought, and there's also natives hops here that grow up to maybe 9,000 or 10,000 feet. We can find them. Hops are also native to, as I said, Germany and Japan. The average size farm in western Colorado is about 6 acres or so. There are some bigger ones. The largest one is at 18 acres, and at the end of this year will be 30 acres. So they're growing. This is a real good area for growing hops because typically it's dry and hot and sunny, and that's what hops love, along with water.
My grandpa bought this farm in 1975. We had originally had almost 500 acres between 2 different properties, and this is the last 111 acres, and it's kind of more of why we're getting into the farming industry, or I am personally, to kind of give a transition between the generations. I couldn't see the last piece of my grandparents' land go, and I had to figure something else out besides boarding horses, because it's just not my cup of tea, so I like beer better. Just started growing about 3 years ago is when I first started putting the first poles in. It's my second year of the grow season. I started growing hops because I was interested in the plant genus itself and the way that it could grow and how it could give me an automatic forest, every year. And it was a perennial plant, so thank God we only have to plant this thing once. Just thought it would be a unique industry to be in, and plus I had to figure out some kind of industry where I could tell my girlfriend that I was at the bar and I was working. So it worked out pretty well.
We've been growing here for about 5 years. We have a small market farm, and we sell herbs and vegetables, flowers, hops, and honey to local restaurants and grocery stores and breweries.
When Will and I first met 10 years ago, we found that we had several things in common, and one of them was we were both really interested in participating in sustainable agriculture. Little did we know, as we were falling in love, that we were also simultaneously and individually studying and researching growing hops in Colorado.
I think I read about a hop shortage 6 or 7 years ago, and it gave me the idea, I think, to possibly try it, and tried growing a few plants, and then it was a much bigger decision to go to a bigger size hop yard, but I think that was the beginning. And of course, you've got microbreweries opening up every week around here, so there seemed to be maybe a possible demand. And at the time, at least around here, nobody was growing hops. Maybe one other person in Boulder County that we know, But it was a new thing, it was unusual, and that might be part of the appeal.
We had the benefit of the Colorado Horticultural Research Center up at CSU, which was already well underway studying hops and hops varieties that would grow well in Colorado. We'll put in 12 experimental plants in the ground. We decided we liked what we saw and we dove in with both feet.
I'm a chemical engineer. I have a day job, I guess you would say, and I've done that now for the past 20 years. And so I do the best I can here on the farm on my spare time, weekends.
We went on a brewery tour actually, and I came up with, let's grow hops. We can't grow grapes over here, let's grow hops. And so Ron was like, oh, why would we do that? You know, if you could do that, everybody would be doing it. And so we did some research. We talked to Colorado State University and some hop experts. So that's where it started, and then the task was finding some place to do it at.
Basically just came up here every day and started driving around. We knew we wanted to be up in this area, just because it's a little bit more agricultural and a little bit lower in elevation. The hops would probably do a little better up here. It's really, really difficult when you start looking and you're trying to find a place with water rights that has, you know, all the things that we need. And we basically stumbled across this place. I just happened to have a for sale sign in the front yard. And the hop yard right now is a 10-acre property. It's actually 10 acres, including all the outside driving areas and the working areas. So the actual hop yard is about 9 acres. In hops, you talk about the whole size of the yard because you have a lot of infrastructure here that takes up some of your space. To combat that, we do what we call a high-density planting. And so we have plants in rows every 10 feet wide, and then inside the rows, the plants are every 3.5 feet. So we have, in the 9 acres of plants, we have a little over 11,000 total plants.
Most of everything that I've learned how to grow hops was from other farmers before I actually put any poles in the ground. I went everywhere. I went to Andrew's family farms. I talked to Ella J. The first year, I ended up obtaining my Zeus and my Galenas, and from High Hops up in Windsor. And I actually went up there and helped them cut all my clones and got cuttings. And one of the first guys I talked to was Glenn up at Rising Sun, and I ended up arranging a trade with him. I wouldn't have been able to get into the business without having the graciousness of him being able to do trade. So
Kind of learned how to grow hops on the fly. At first, there was some information available through CSU and the extension office there, and of course, you know, books and the internet. There was another grower in the county that we learned from, and in terms of growing organically, we had to learn a lot of things as we went.
We are just about to complete our 5th harvest, and we're pretty excited about that. In that 5 years, we've gained a tremendous amount of experience. There's actually quite a bit of information available to you on best practices on how to grow hops, even on a hobby level. We followed a lot of that, and then in some cases we of course had to experiment. We've had some wonderful happy accidents and we've made some mistakes. Probably one of the most important mentors in our life has been Dr. Ron Godin on the Western Slope. Has really been a tremendous mentor in hop growing.
We visited some farms in the Western Slope, a couple of farms that were very helpful to us in the beginning, that let us come in and see their infrastructure and how did they get set up and the equipment that they were using, and tried to, you know, take the best of all of those that we could find and pattern ours around that.
Well, first of all, we needed a trellis, so I researched that a bit, but settled on a real simple design. So you need to erect poles because the hops like to climb. They produce more when they're climbing. It's clearly the way that hop farming traditionally works. So building a trellis, you know, we installed a very, very simple drip system. So our water use was very conservative. Obtaining the plants and getting the plants in the ground was a big effort. There were originally about 480 plants that we put in, which makes us a relatively small hop yard, you know, in terms of hop production. So we consider ourselves to be a small scale sort of sideline hop yard.
Well, Will was the brilliant engineer behind putting the geometry and the everything that was required to keep those poles erect. We don't necessarily deal with a lot of hail in this part of Colorado, but we do deal with wind. And it was a really important factor, and Will got that right. We also knew that we were going to be small. We wanted to experiment and start out with just a ½ acre. Because of that, we knew we were not going to be investing in equipment for harvesting. So that was a really big consideration on how high we were going to go, how we were going to harvest this. And we chose the height that we chose originally and have since raised that height because that's exactly what hops want. They require going higher.
Basically, as soon as the ground starts to thaw, we come in and we cut the rhizomes back. So basically what that does, two things. One is it's a product that we can sell. The other reason for cutting back the rhizomes is to keep the hops from spreading all across the field, because eventually if you just let them go, they take over the entire field, and we want to concentrate them into the main crown of the plant and into the rows where they're at so that they're not all over. Then we come back in about a month after that, and kind of as the hops start to come up, they'll get to be about 6 inches to a foot tall in across the field. And they're coming up at different times based on varieties and parts of the field and whatever else. So we mow them all down at that point and try and get them as uniform as we can so that they come back up and everything trains at the same time.
We dig out these runners, which look more or less, they look like this. If you can see that, it's like a root essentially. And if you get close to it, it has little nodes on it. And each one of those nodes, under the right conditions of soil temperature and moisture, can become an individual plant.
It starts with blowing out the rhizomes after the 3rd year. You need to keep your crowns clean for downy mildew issues and any of that. I don't have a carper right now, so unfortunately it gets all done by hand. This next season will be my first season doing that, but you got to wait 3 years before you really start pruning them up and allowing that root structure to develop. April and May is when you get your little spring terminal nodes that come and pop out, and you're a little excited about the new year, and unfortunately you have to cut them all back. So you cut off the suckers, and from that you let them get a little bit taller, put in all the strings, and go to town. Most of all my labor out here is all volunteer, all friends and anybody else that's willing to work for beer. I try to recruit them and have them come out. And so in the beginning of this year, I was pretty fortunate. Some of my friends over at Vindication Brewing helped me throw a nice little extravaganza and a wonderful party. And we had a great turnout, and there was about 65 volunteers that came out for a nice smoked pig and a keg of beer. And we actually tied almost 35,000 linear feet of rope in less than like 8 hours. So that would have taken me about a month and a half, 2 months. So it was a unique and special time, and it was really nice to see the community come together and be willing to help a young farmer that's just starting out and really doesn't have the capital to be able to hire enough employees to make this thing work.
As they start to come back up, that's when we'll come in and actually drop the strings down from the cables to each one of the plants. Like I said, we have a little over 11,000 plants. Each plant can take up to 4 strings. So you're upwards of over 40,000 strings that you're talking about dropping down from these cables.
These are the hop clips that we use. They're called W clips or hop clips. It's just a little piece of sheet metal cut into a W, and this is the special tool that's made for the W clip. So the clip goes right inside there and holds on, and then the string just goes underneath the clamp. Push it into the ground, and as the string starts to pull up, the W opens up and holds it into the dirt.
That's a long process. That takes us, about 3 weeks to get all that done. Anywhere from a couple of weeks to a month after that, we come back in and actually train the plants up the strings. So the plants will be about 1.5 feet tall. The shoots will be coming up off of those, and you take it and just wrap it around the string so it knows to start growing up that string, rather than trying to climb up the wires or anything else that it'll find.
We try to look for the nicest looking vines that we can find out of this increasing group of vines, and then we simply twine them around the string always going clockwise. The hops they always turn clockwise, and I'm not exactly sure why, but they do. If you try to twine one counterclockwise, it'll go and then it'll stop and then it'll come back around. So we're always thinking about going clockwise. You know, the best practice is to have 2 strings per plant. So every plant down this row has 2 strings associated with it, is the idea. And then it's supposed to be ideal to twine 3 binds around each string. So if you go down the row, you'll see that we're not very perfect about that. Partly we're just trying to make sure we have enough binds, but later I'll go down and I'll try to minimize. I'll try to look for the ones that have too many binds, and I'll try to remove some of them before they get too big. And the reason for that is, as they twine around, at least in our experience, the plants want to shoot side arms, they're called, laterally, and we get a lot of hop cone development on those side arms. So when you get too many binds twining around, it kind of inhibits that.
You start trellising and training the binds, and then the rest of the summer is maintaining, weed growth and making sure that the water regimen is on point. And from then, you hope and pray for a good harvest, and then start cutting them down.
At that point, then it's mostly just maintenance. Fertilizing, watering, cultivating in between the rows, and then kind of just watching them grow and watching for pests, treating for any of that. That's basically through the month of June and July. Towards the end of July, they'll start to actually form the flowers and then the cones, and that's when we start checking them about once a day for dry matter testing and determining when they're going to be ready to be harvested.
Because we grow organically, there are certain things that we have to do or not do. If there is an insect problem, for instance, spraying an insecticide is not an option. One thing I think we've had to learn is how to plant companion plants near the hop yard that attract beneficial insects. So if a harmful insect comes into the hop yard or into the area, we have sort of a ready reserve, hopefully, of beneficials like lady beetles and lacewings and so on that will help with that.
There's another mentor in our life, Dr. Frank Stonecker. In our first year, we were besieged with aphid and the high alpha hops. I'd never seen anything quite like it, and I was really quite concerned, and called this wonderful man who happens to be a PhD entomologist, and he would give us advice on the fly while we were in the field. And his advice was, you need to go get some lady beetles and introduce them to the hop yard. And you're going to be amazed at what happens. And if I'm wrong, he says, I'll buy you a beer. He says, wait 2 weeks and then we'll talk. And it was absolutely one of the most remarkable 2 weeks of our lives. We really watched those lady beetles dispense with literally hundreds of thousands of aphid very efficiently. I would say learning about this remarkable, wonderful herb has taken our passion for growing for biodiversity into a full-on commitment. And I didn't have any idea in the beginning. While I was invested in companion planting, and we knew that hops attracted not so beneficial insects and diseases. I had no idea this was going to absolutely change my way of growing.
Yeah, we had really nice hot days that gave really good vertical growth, and then they cooled down at night. So, I mean, they had their little break from the heat every like 5-6 days. There was a little sprinkle. So yeah, it was great. I mean, I haven't really had to water at all this year. I've watered 5 days is my actual irrigation. So this year's been about perfect.
Okay, this is an almost mature hop cone. It's fairly good size. This is one of the smaller ones. This is Willamette, and it's an aroma hop. And what I'm going to do is split it open. And what you see is the little yellow gold dust inside, and that's what we're after. These are lupulins, this yellow gold, almost powder, but what they really are is little oil balls, and that's where the essential oils and alpha acids and beta acids and all the other good stuff are in these oil balls. If you look at them under a magnifying glass, it looks like a water balloon, and as it matures, the water balloon fills, and once it's full, then it becomes opaque, and they're ready to harvest. And you can smell the hop smell right in them, and it's just wonderful when they're fresh.
Yeah, these are crystal. This is the last hop, the last plant variety that matures for us, and normally The first week of September, maybe into the second week of September is when they're truly ready.
They're really nice. You can see if you just press on them, that's usually how I check for moisture content, and it plumps back up, which is really, really nice. And if you do a real nice light rub, you know, you can kind of smell the grassy aroma. And then if you do, and you'll see that the petals just slowly start peeling off. And if you do a hard rub and you break up the lupulin glands inside, you can see how sticky it gets on my hand. And that's where you really get the aroma smell. So it's a little bit, I get a little bit of a spicy, maybe floral characteristic. And this is going to be a hop. I've never used crystal hops before. And this will be a hop that I'm going to put into just a sessionable pale ale style beer. It'll be a single malt, single hop. And so this will be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to using this hop.
Harvesting is a two-step process. We have to cut down these bines that are on cords, and they're called bines because they don't have any tendrils like grape vines. And so they hook on and they climb the coir cord because they have hairs on the stem that grabs onto the cord. So we have to cut these down as the first step of the process, both top and bottom, mostly right at near ground level.
A lot of the brewers that we use want our hops fresh, picked right off the vine and dropped into a fresh hop beer. So we have to kind of start letting them know a couple of weeks in advance, okay, the nuggets are going to be ready around the 25th of August, and so that they can start to plan their brew schedules around that. Typically towards the end of August and the very beginning of September is when we're harvesting. And that's when we're actually cutting down the vines, taking them to the picker, separating the hops from the vine and the leaves, and actually drying and processing the hops.
And then we bring them into a barn where there's a picker, which is a combine that is specially designed by the Germans to pick the hop cones off the vines.
We got this picker from Germany, and it came over on a boat, and it came in a container on a rail car, and it got delivered here, and it was in about 300 parts. Two big, huge pieces that we had to stack together, and then another 298 other parts that we had no idea how to deal with. And we got lucky, and a guy showed up here that knew what he was doing, and he helped us put it together. When you're talking about, we had to bring a crane out here, we had to lift the one piece onto the other, weld it all back together, put all the parts together. The Wolf Picker it's basically a converted thrash machine. It's basically our version of a combine. So the hop vine is hooked to a chain, and it's pulled through the picker. And as the picker runs, it's got 7 picking finger drums that strip all the leaves and the hops from that vine. And then as those leaves and hops are stripped, they're dropped onto a conveyor belt. And when those come around on the conveyor, it hits a suction fan, and the suction fan sucks all the leaves to it and allows the hops to roll off of that suction. And the hops roll down onto the bottom conveyor, and then they come out of the side of the machine on the small conveyor. And ideally all the leaves and the trash go out the back. The entire vine itself and the string that it was attached to come out of the top. It's still hooked to the chain, and it comes out the top and goes through a knife that chops it up into small pieces, spits it out into that same trash pile to go to compost. Some hops varieties have bigger cones, some have smaller, tighter cones. So the bigger cones, like the Chinook variety, it's a bigger cone. It's typically, when we pick it, it's a little bit more open and loose. And if we have the suction fans up too tight, they'll suck right to the same belt that the leaves are on and come out the back end. So we have to tweak the airflow down on those so that the hops roll off. And we had some other farmers out here that were using our picker this year, and one of them had some Galenas, and they're a really, really tight, wound, small hop. And those things were just falling right off, and so we could tweak the air all the way up, and literally we were getting 0 leaves through that. He was getting all hops. It was beautiful.
Originally, we picked by hand, and what you find out when you pick by hand, you need a lot of people to help, but you quickly find out that it's not practical. So we now use a machine that was built by a neighbor of ours at the Andrews farm, who built his own hop picking machine for very small scale hop growers. That's how we do it. So those are the options, machines and hands, and it takes about an hour for one person to pick 2 pounds of hops. It's slow going by hand.
And then after they get picked, then they get put in a hop dryer that passes warm air. Here in western Colorado we can use just ambient air because it's really dry and warm, usually during harvest season. So we pass warm air over them to bring the moisture percent down from about 75% down to about 10%.
This is our drying unit. So we bring the hops straight from the picker in these bins, and they go straight into the dryer. And we're using forced air and heat when necessary. It's open on the bottom of each bin, and the air just pushes up from underneath. This year's been exceptionally humid, so we've had to use a lot more heat than normal. Normally we just use ambient air to dry these. If the humidity is down in the 15 or 20% range like normal, this year it's been more like 75-80%, so we've had to introduce heat to get these things to dry. So they'll sit on here anywhere from about 18 to 24 hours ideally, and get dry. And these guys just went in this morning, so they're still wet. These are from last night, so they're getting a little closer to being dry. We'll actually bale these this afternoon. The dry weight, about 20% of the wet weight, somewhere in that neighborhood. This one right here probably weighs about 120 pounds right now. This one, probably about 30. Finish our harvest with about 4,000 pounds of hops, dry hops.
And when you condition and put them on the conditioning floor, then the dryness in the leaf will suck the moisture out of the strig or the center stem, and then they're completely dry, and we can package them and send them, or pelletize them and send them to the brewers. That's basically the whole process of harvesting and drying and picking and packaging and getting hops ready for the brewer. They also get sent away for analysis to determine what the alpha acid content is and some other things, essential oils in the hops that the brewer needs to know before he starts putting them in his beer.
Well, I've been a home brewer for about 7 years, and so I've always loved beer, and I've always wanted to be in the beer industry in some way or another. I looked at starting my own hop farm, and actually in doing that research I've realized that there really wasn't any processing of hops in the state. I thought, well, I've got an engineering background, and you know, I like equipment and machinery, so and I don't really have land to grow hops on, so I thought this was a way that I could get involved in that. So I started the business in Longmont because from a geographical perspective, there's actually is a fair amount of hop farms in the area. One of the largest being Ellijay. Hops come in different forms. The first form would be wet hops. Wet hops either need to be used or dried within 24 hours of being picked. Next, there's actually dried hops. These are dried whole cone hops, and you can actually see the cones. These could be used by breweries right as they are. Most breweries don't like it in this form because they're kind of hard to deal with, clogs things, and so a lot of breweries don't like to use leaf hops. So then the next step would be to actually pelletize those hops. So you would run it through a hammer mill, and you would actually break those cone hops into smaller material so it can be fed through the pellet mill. Then the pellet mill compresses that small material into pellets, and these can easily be measured out and added into the boil kettle. They will dissolve. Due to the increased surface area, you'll actually get a little bit better utilization of the hops, and you can easily pump that through the system without any ill effects, and that particulate matter will just settle out in the fermenters, or it could be filtered out. I actually have to be a licensed wholesale food manufacturer because these hops do go into consumable products, and since I'm altering them by changing the shape or processing them in some way, it's akin to manufacturing food. This year we will actually be selling some of our hops into to home brewers directly or through homebrew shops. We'll be packaging in 2-ounce packages of pellets. We just feel like that's another way that we can get people using Colorado hops.
We sell some hops fresh, so some breweries like to make fresh hop beers, and it's a seasonal, harvest-only special thing, and it's really delightful.
I'm Dennis from Echo Brewing in Frederick, Colorado. We're happy to showcase Niwot hops, Chinook and Cascade hops, fresh hop beer.
It's something that you can't experience at any other time of the year. So we've worked with quite a few breweries that like to do the fresh hop beers. In addition, we dry hops using a solar dryer that our neighbor at Andrews Farm, Rich, built. It dries the hops, and then we can bag them and sell them to breweries as dried whole cone hops, or to homebrew stores. And so we've worked with 3 homebrew stores extensively over the last few years. That market is for homebrewers. It involved a bit of legwork and some sales, so going to breweries and talking to brewers, to homebrew stores and talking to the homebrew store folks. So in that sense, we had to find people at first, and more and more were found on the internet. In the spring, we sell rhizomes, and starter plants. So this is kind of like a little nursery in a sense.
Hop Nouveau, it basically means new hop, and it's all about brewing beers using fresh hops. And usually this happens in August. So most of the hops are ready to harvest in August. Breweries will go and harvest those hops and get them in their brew within 24 hours. And this creates a very aromatic sort of character to your beers when you do that, because the oils are very fresh. The hops are whole, they haven't been processed. You can get your hops from the farm into your beer within 24 hours. It is a significant character it adds to your beer.
Welcome to the 9th annual Fresh Hop Beer Celebration here at Falling Rock. This is the result of a full summer's worth of work from our farmers. This is how the hops are enjoyed in Colorado, as fresh as humanly possible. We have 37 breweries here today showcasing Colorado hops and their fresh hop beers.
There, here, we're doing it.
Yeah,
you got it. Cool. Thanks, Will. Fresh hops from Niwot Hops. And tomorrow this will go straight into the Pale Ale. It's actually the Niwot Homegrown Pale Ale.
There's basically, 3 different kinds of hops. There's a low alpha acid hop, such as Cascade or Mount Hood or Willamette, that doesn't have maybe 5 or 6% alpha acid that we use in flavoring and aroma, and for flavor and aroma in beer at the end of the beer boiling making process. We also have high alpha acid hops such as Chinook or Nugget that have 13, 14, 16% alpha acid that we use for bittering. And that is put in at the initial boil, and that's why we boil beer, is to get the bitterness out of the hops. It takes about an hour of boiling to solubilize the bitterness or the alpha acids, to solubilize them and get them into the beer. And there's also dual purpose hops that can be used for both, either mild bittering or some strong flavor and aroma. They're about alpha acids of 7s and 8s. And typically a farmer will grow both types, so he can sell both to a brewer, both a bittering hop or 1 or 2 bittering hops and 1 or 2 flavor and aroma hops. Right now Cascade is real popular both with the brewer and because there's a shortage of them, and so lots of growers are putting in Cascades right now and it's a good dual purpose hop. In Washington State, Cascade, about the highest alpha acid they have is 5.5 or 6. But here we can grow Cascades with alpha acids of 9, which means that brewers have to buy a little bit less of it to get the same effect from our good Colorado hops.
I mean, this is the mash tun. It's where we mix our barley with hot water to extract as much sugar as possible. The wort, the sugary liquid in the mash tun gets pumped into the kettle where we boil it with the hops. They're freshly picked crystal hops from J Farms in Longmont, and they don't undergo a drying process like your whole cone regular hops would. So these hops have a lot more moisture in them than typical hops that we use on a daily basis, and that's why you tend to use about 5 times as much wet hops as compared to regular hops, simply because the moisture in them sort of dilutes some of the essential oils that we look for, and things like that. So yeah, it's time for me to add these hops.
All right, last bag. Oh, that's a beautiful sight.
Hops are to beer as Dawn is to Ruth after almost 47 years of marriage.
Hops are to beer as flowers are to spring.
Hops are to beer as lemon is to lemonade.
Hops is to beer as style is to literature.
Hops are to beer as music is to life.
Hops are to beer as blue is to sky.
Hops are to beer as love is to life.
Hops are to beer as Nicolas Cage is to film.
Hops is to beer like ketchup is to hot dog.
Hops are to beer as breath is to life. Hops are to beer as heat is to fire.
Hops are to beer as air is to life.
Hops are to beer as the lips are to a kiss.
Okay, it'll take a couple of minutes since the depth of the hop bed is so deep. We're now transferring the wort. It'll come up through the bottom, and that's a beautiful aroma. So all the hops are now in the wort. We got a great aroma going on here. All the hops are soaked with wort, and the oils are seeping out of the hops and into the wort. And this is a great opportunity to have a really nice aroma in the wort and in the beer. So when we have the finished beer, you'll be able to, when you lift your glass up to take a drink, you'll have this real nice aroma of the crystal hops, and then you'll get some of the bittering of the crystal hops towards the back end. So we'll give it a couple more minutes, and then we'll transfer it back into the kettle. We'll whirlpool it, which is basically collecting all of the unwanted hops and protein and what's called trub, and it'll collect it down at the bottom of the kettle. And when we transfer, it'll be hopefully a lot clearer beer that goes into the fermenter than if you don't clear it. Nice thing about having it in the mash tun too is the little plates have slots in them, so it'll be the wort that gets drained through, and the rest of the hops will stay in here, and I'll go ahead and clean that out. So that'll be a pretty easy process. So all I'm doing right now is just turning the valve on, and I'll just check for flow to make sure that it's transferring at the proper speed, and off we go. So another 15-20 minutes and we should be able to whirlpool and get it into the fermenter.
These will steep for about half an hour, and then I'll start pumping the hot wort through the heat exchanger into the fermenter, and in about 14 to 17 days the beer will be ready to drink.
Yes, hops are agriculturally viable in Colorado if you have a lot of capital investment to start. That's the stumbling block, or one of the hurdles, is it costs anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 per acre to put them in. Right now, on a mature acre of hops, we're grossing between $22,000 and $25,000 per acre a year, and it takes 3 to 4 years to get a mature crop because they're a perennial.
Processing them is insurmountable amount of work. So if you can get them to sell for wet hops, that's your best bang for your buck pound-wise, because there's about 70% moisture still left in the cones when you pick them. And so once you dry them out, they dry into about 1/3 of what the weight is. So I prefer to sell them wet, but I actually have a processing facility I just built this last year. It has all the drying capabilities that I can. I borrowed Ella J's hop picker to get all the rest of the hops off the vine and get them over here to the dryer. I'm looking forward to the testing to see what my alphas and betas are before I can kind of hit the street and go talk to brewers. A lot of it for me is trial and error. Every year that I grow, I've learned new things of what I shouldn't do and what I should do. So as time and years go by, I think I'm going to be a better grower and deliver a better product. Hops really isn't the capitalistic idea that people keep on portraying it. There is way too much labor for the amount of money they actually get out of it. So you have to do it for the love of hops and not the love of money. So that's probably one of your biggest issues that I see for hops growth in the state of Colorado. We don't have the right tools. We don't have all the equipment, and the capital investment for that equipment is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So to do it correctly, you better be willing to write a very large check or be able to do it small enough where you can maintain it and have a good relationship with maybe one brewery.
I think some of the bigger challenges have been around, production and, scheduling picking and that whole part has certainly been challenging. In addition to sales and, educating, I think, the brewing public that there is a local source of hops, especially seasonal hops available.
One of the things we have been successful in doing in the last 5 years is attracting more brewers that are interested in a fresh product. Well, in order to bring a fresh product to a brewer in a timely manner, we have a small 48-hour window from when it's picked to when it hits the brew kettle. And that basically means we don't sleep a lot for a couple of weeks. That's okay. This is a very exciting harvest. From my standpoint, it's maintaining that balance. And once you become incredibly invested, that everything in that hop yard and the surrounding area is integrated, that every weed, every insect, every bit of microbiology beneath the soil is all integrated.
We're beekeepers, we're very sensitive to how what we do and what others do affects pollinators like honeybees. We do what we can do to promote habitats for wildlife in this area. It's a very special part of Boulder County along Left Hand Creek here. And so all of these things are things we think about. And the hop yard is just one component of that.
We got 11,000 baby plants and started putting them in the ground and had lots of people out here to help. And, we're thinking, maybe 2 weeks into it, we would be done and watch them grow and life would be beautiful. It took us almost the entire summer to get all of the plants into the ground. So that was something we had not anticipated at all. We thought that would be much quicker. And everything throughout this process has been, it takes longer and costs more money. It's funny, it started out as the weeds were our biggest challenge. Hail, Mother Nature, that's a big challenge, but that just comes with being in agriculture. But the weeds were a big challenge. We thought we could really keep them under control. I had friends who were like, I'll come out and help you. And I was like, come on out. Just, you work on one little bit and you think you've accomplished something, and it's just overwhelming. But now the biggest challenge is finding labor, actually. The labor issue is just, it's really hard to find workers, and that's why we use our family. No, which has been a great positive, I will say, coming out of this. We started it to be able to do something with our kids that we could pass down to our kids, and actually getting to have the rest of our parents and brothers and sisters all come out and help us too has been really great. Just spending time with them that we wouldn't normally have spent with them has really been a joy. It's been a lot of fun most of the time. I think by the end they're ready to be done too, but I think they're enjoying it also.
Definitely, everything takes much longer and everything is way more expensive than we had anticipated. 10 acres probably wasn't the smartest thing to start with. All the research that we did, everybody we talked to basically had said, you need to have about 10 acres in order to do it. We happened to have 10 acres available. We actually had more than that available. We could have done even bigger, but for starting out and with the lack of labor force that we had and really the lack of capital that we had at the time, 10 acres was probably a stretch. And obviously, it's taken almost the full 5 years of our initial lease just to get the infrastructure set up. So in retrospect, could we have started smaller? Yeah. Now that we're here and it's done, I'm kind of glad that we have it. because next year should be our first full production year and actually make some money. So
it's the pat on the backs when somebody gets to go and actually taste your work. I mean, granted, it takes both sides. It takes a quality brewer and a quality hop to really make a good beer. But having the pat on the backs from the people saying, wow, this is the best beer I've ever tasted, and knowing that you were a part of it is rewarding. It's definitely nice to feel wanted and appreciated for the amount of work that you've put into your passion.
It's so gratifying actually to have put this in and watch it grow and then harvest it and then make something out of it. But every year at harvest, it's just, it's really moving to see the people who've helped us. We're so grateful for that, and it's just, we've accomplished one more season.
It could be the most rewarding thing is drinking the beer that the brewers make with our hops. It's rewarding to be part of this local community movement of local agriculture, of obviously local microbreweries and nano breweries. These little companies that are becoming like neighborhood gathering places for communities and neighborhoods. It's fun to participate and be a part of that.
This is a really exciting time of year. We've worked pretty hard to this moment, and for me, the reward is to bring this really gorgeous, well-cultivated herb to these incredibly creative chefs and brewers and home brewers. That's really rewarding for me.
Yeah, the question on if I have a favorite local beer is completely unfair. There's too many opportunities to enjoy different beers. Experimenting and being adventurous is my favorite part about being a beer lover and being in Colorado.
Maharaja by Avery is kind of my favorite, and it is a hoppy beer.
Left hand's good juju because of the ginger in it.
General category is pretty easy. Yeah, I'm an IPA guy.
I'm very into actually sour beers right now. Say pretty much anything done by Crooked Stave is pretty darn good.
They make a really good IPA actually at the Kettle and Stuff.
My favorite craft beer is whatever I have in my hand.
IPA or pale ales, things like that.
Mercenary is a great beer from Odell.
In the spring, it's probably Great Divide's Colette, but in the winter, it's probably Great Divide's Yeti or Odell's Cutthroat Porter.
Oscar Blues, Good Night.
It's summertime. I'm a Ska Brewing Mexican lager guy.
I personally like amber ales.
Old Chub as a Scotch ale. New Belgium's Shift.
Odell's 90 shilling.
Beer I brew myself.
I like light beer. This is a girly beer.
Winter stout, summer, you got to get into your ginger ales, and the Good Juju is one of my favorite summer beers.
I like the dark beer because they're really thick and heavy and stronger.
I love Renegade because they do big hops.
My favorite craft beer is whichever one I'm drinking at the time.
Without question, there is just no mistaking a fresh hop brew. We're going to be able to have that opportunity more and more.